choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Randy Robinson here, and today, just one of those. I love these. I have someone who has just one of those testimonies that you just go, wow, look what God can do. And, you know, there's this sort of human interest in, you know, the going from the really awful situation to the good situation. We all like the underdog. We like the success stories. I get that. And if you're like me, raised in the church, you've been a Christian most of your life, and God's just blessed you, that's a great testimony too. But if you're in a really bad situation, or you think, you know, I am too messed up to even ever be used by God, and maybe even to really know God, this is the kind of story that no, I mean, God can reach you wherever. There is no mess that God can't reach into. There is no brokenness that he can't put back together. There's no bottom with God. That's just the thing. No matter how far down you think you are, God's there. And that's the beauty of today's story. Jodie Ballenger is my guest. And last year I had her husband, Billy Ballenger, on. And on the broadcast show last year, we had both Billy and Jodie. So we had a fun time chatting before the conversation started, because these are just really great people. And it is one of those kind of wow stories. So we're going to dive into it. Chat is open. We'll welcome all you guys wherever you're watching. If you want to be a part of the conversation, we invite you to be a part of it. If you haven't subscribed or followed or liked or whatever you click wherever you're watching, go ahead and do that now. Jodie Ballenger tells her story in this book right here called Beautifully Unbroken. And the subtitle is The Prostitute's Daughter. And, you know, when you see a subtitle like that, you know you're coming from a rough situation. But you'll see here, and God's done some beautiful things in her life and her husband's life, and it's just a beautiful story. So Jodie, great to see you again, and great to have you here to tell your story on Life Today Live.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to get my message out, and that's exactly what it is. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can make one change today, and it can completely change your life and your children's lives by making that one good decision today. But yes, my story starts really early. When I was 9 years old, my mom divorced my dad, and I knew nothing about it. I came home from school, saw a U-Haul sitting in our driveway, wondered what was up, and walked in the house, and the house was empty. And my mom said, hey, just very nonchalantly, I'm leaving your dad and we're moving in with Aunt Linda. And so that very next day, we got to Cleveland, Ohio with her sister. And me not knowing, just being a 9-year-old in third grade, we were moving in. She moved us into a drug house in the ghetto of Cleveland, Ohio. And when I say drug dealer, her and her husband, they were huge drug dealers. And the 13-gallon black trash bags that you would use for your trash, they were filled to the brim, couldn't even close them, with marijuana. You name it, they had it. When you open up the refrigerator, there was a little bit of food in there, but mostly it was mason jars filled with every kind of pill you can imagine. So within a week of me being there, I was smoking pot, I was popping pills. By the age of 11, I was in juvenile. The detective that took me to juvenile for the first time said, Jodie, you better straighten up. But it's really hard to straighten up when you have a house, when you're living in a house. And I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. My life was filled with fighting, you name it.
Yeah. Let me ask you, what made your mom think this was a good idea? What was going on with her?
Well, she had, my book actually starts off with her story. Her very first memory as a child was being sexually abused by her stepdad. And that carried on all throughout her elementary, middle school. She got married the first chance that she could get. So she married very young. She had my older sister and my older brother, which is 9 and 10 years older than me. Her husband didn't put any, they lived in basically a little shack. And he was making money, but he wasn't spending it on them. So after a couple of years of that, she gave each of the kids to their grandparents, and she went out on the streets. Well, within a week or two, I mean, there's so many people out there that they can talk you in, especially when you're coming from what she came through. Sure. Within a couple of weeks, she was being used as a prostitute. And so she didn't have stability or a good foundation whatsoever. Right. And I think and then my father, he did a couple stints in prison himself. So here the prostitute and the thief got together. And then, but my dad, he was over that part of his life. And so he was a plumber. He provided very well for us. But I don't think that she could handle stability. And so by moving us there, we were left to fend for ourselves. When I was 11 years old, she moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Muncie, Indiana. And her parents, actually both parents had cancer. And so she moved me and my sister, 11 and a 12-year-old little girls, to a trailer, rented the trailer and left us there. Jeez. And she would come back a couple times a week to make sure that we were okay. She said she had an aunt that lived like a block away, and said, if you ever need anyone, you go down to her house. But we were literally left there to fend for ourselves. And so I got in that habit of taking care of myself. And I was already on drugs since 9. So you, of course, get with the wrong people that are doing the exact same thing. So I was in and out of juvenile, 11, 12, and by 13, I was in the Scared Straight program, where they're taking you into prison and they're talking to you and saying, now you need to listen to your mom. And I'm thinking, well, I am listening to my mom. My mom doesn't, if she was present at home, she wasn't really present. Like, she wasn't in our lives. She was just like on the sidelines of our life. So we were literally just doing whatever we wanted to do. And I know that I desperately needed someone that loved me, and I desperately needed to be taken care of. I have a story for you. So 6th grade graduation, or actually it's before the 6th grade graduation. It was the Christmas before, and my teacher put out a sign-up sheet and said, what are you bringing for Christmas to our Christmas party? Well, I signed up to bring a cake, and I was so excited. And I told my mom, and this is when she is back and forth to her parents' house, so she wasn't there a lot at all. But she got me cake mix and everything. So here I am as a little 6-year-old making this cake, and I forgot that our stove didn't work. And so I turned on the gas and I went to put the cake in and realized, oh no, I forgot to light it. So then I take a piece of paper, light it, and then I stick it in the oven, and the oven exploded on me. Yeah. And I was in shock, and I was just like, oh my gosh, my hair was singed. It was just horrible. But I was determined to make that cake for my 6th grade class. So I stuck it in, made the cake, stuck it on cardboard because I didn't have a platter, took it into my 6th grade class, and here everyone brought these beautiful platters of everything. And here's my little cake on a cardboard. I think it was then that I really, the realization of, I'm alone. I am alone in this world. So by 14, I'm on meth. At that time, they said, okay, Jodie, you've been in and out of juvenile. We've taken you to Scared Straight. You've been in and out of the children's home. Each time they'd take me to the children's home, I'd just run away. And so they said, we're sending you out of county. When they sent me out of county, they sent me to a faith-based reform school. And that reform school is called White's. And when I walked into White's, they showed me a love I don't know that I had ever received.
How old were you? How old were you then?
So I had just turned 15 when they sent me to White's, and that's where Billy and I met. And so they kept the guys on one end of the campus and the girls on the other end of the campus. But we figured out one way that the guys and girls could get together and talk, and that was in choir. And so I'm like, I want to be in choir. And so within a few weeks of me being in choir, that's where Billy and I met. And now Billy actually came from a really good home. And he had, all his aunts, uncles, everyone was interested in his life. So as I'm telling him everything, that I did, all this, he's in disbelief, like, oh my gosh. So once we got out of that reform school, and now mind you, I had rededicated my life at White's. We were on the traveling choir team to where we would go to different churches. I mean, they really showed me the true love of God. Yeah. And, but when I left there, I was going right back in to what I came from. And that was partying every night, getting into trouble. And so within days, I was doing the exact same thing. And then Billy ended up coming down, and we had Mindy, our little girl, about 4 months after we got married, which was July of '87. And our first little girl was born on November 20th of '87. And within a few months of that, we were, life just really went downhill, and there was affairs, different things like that. We actually made it through that. And even as like not being in church, we just found a way to stick with each other through that. But then we started selling pot. Yeah. And known felons were coming in and out of our house. And then September 12th, 1988, our house was raided by a SWAT team.
I want to talk about that, but I want to back up and fill in a couple of gaps first, because when you're sent to White's, to the you're what, 15? I think, is that what you said?
That's right, 15.
So how long were you there, and how old were you when you and Billy got married?
Okay, so I was at White's for 14 months, and Billy was there for 15 months. And I was 17 when we got married, and Billy was 18. So my dad signed over rights.
Oh, wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you guys are young. And remind our audience that why was Billy there, coming from a good home? Okay. What's he doing?
Yes. So each of his parents had gotten remarried, and he just could not get along with the step parents. And so he actually went to White's to get away from family life, and that really helped him. But then he meets me, which has a completely different lifestyle. Yeah. And so he knew that when he moved in with me, he knew, wait a minute, I'm going to have to toughen up really quick, because everyone I hung out was the bullies in the neighborhood. I was the bully in school, but now I have a defense on that, which I didn't have clothes. I didn't have anything. So I learned really quick that if I was the bully, no one would say anything about my clothes, or, you know what I'm saying? And so that was my defense, was, you better not say anything to me. Yeah. And so I just hung around from 9 years old throughout my whole life, was hanging around with kids actually just like me. They didn't have good home lives, and we were kind of sticking ourselves together to be our own little family. Although there was bad things happening, and we're in doing drugs and things. So so then September 12th happens, and Mindy, our little girl, is 9 months old. And when I had her, I didn't hardly ever allow anyone to watch her. She was stuck at my hip, and I just loved her because I told myself I was not the type of little girl to dream. I didn't have anything to dream of. Everything I was seeing around me was destruction. And I thought, okay, well, I'll probably get married. It might last a year or two, but I will always have my children. But guess what? When our house was raided by a SWAT team, that same detective that actually took me to jail or to juvenile for the first time when I was 11 was the exact same detective that came in the house, looked at me and said, Jodie, I wish you would have straightened up, and took Mindy out of my arms. Oh my goodness. But within a matter of days, Billy and I had bonded ourselves out of jail, and we were like, okay, we want our little girl back. We did everything that they had asked us to do. And we even took another step, and that was to remove ourselves away from the situation. Everyone I knew in Muncie was bad news. I mean, they were either on drugs or felons, something. And so Billy and I made the decision together that we would rather be homeless than to stay in Muncie. We needed to change our life, and we needed to make new friends. And so we moved to Indianapolis, which is about an hour away from Muncie. I got a job at a gas station. Billy was ordered to go through drug rehab. And so I had worked and got enough checks in of us being homeless. So what we would do, we would spend the night in our car. We would go to a truck stop, get ready for the day. And then we did this for several weeks until we could save up enough money. And we actually rented a home. He went off to drug treatment for 35 days. While he was away, I had gotten robbed at gunpoint twice. And when he came back, I told him, I've been robbed a couple of times. And he says, well, if it happens again, you can't stay there. And so wouldn't you know, happened again. And he says, that's it. So the next day I was expecting a check. So we go in to get my check that next day, and the mail had not run yet. And so we're waiting around, and this guy comes in the gas station and he says, I don't know what's going on with my truck, but it's overheating. Do you have any water? He brings the water back into me and he says, I don't know, because my truck's fine now. And then he heard Billy say, we need to go. I need to find a job. And he said, do you need a job? And Billy was like, well, yeah. And he says, I'm going to hire you right now. And
all right,
so then he had the hook in his mouth. Right.
Okay. And that's when things really started to turn around. I want to ask you, though, where God was throughout this, because you said when you went to White's, to, like, is that a reform school? Is that the right term?
Well, yes, White's. It's a place where juveniles, if they're having a rough time with anything, family members, mom and dads can send them there, or you can be sent by the courts. I was personally sent by the courts.
Okay. So you mentioned you rededicated your life, and so there's something prior to that, and when you're talking about what happened in the gas station, I know that was a big turning point, and so I want to cover that. But real quick, I want to show people the book. This is beautifully Unbroken, Jodie's complete story, because you can tell there's a lot going on here, and I want to show you her website as well. It's jodieballenger.com. And you can see the spelling right there, and it's in the chat as well. So if you're wanting to follow up on this, or even wanting to get in contact with her, or Billy's a singer, he's getting ready to go on tour. There's some things that you guys can do, because you can tell already, Jodie, and it's true for Billy, they can speak to a lot of especially young kids, young adults who might not listen to the guy in the suit that's the pastor at your church. But back up before we get to where that truck stop encounter took you guys. Trace God just briefly throughout your life, because something, you don't rededicate your life unless you had a prior experience, but then you don't go and get married and have a kid and sell drugs to get raided by the FBI in your home unless there's a falling away a little bit, right? Because that's not
Right.
what we would call the Christian lifestyle. So where was
Right.
God through all this for you?
Okay, so my mom had taken us to church. It was a Pentecostal church, and it was one of the Pentecostal church where you didn't wear makeup, jewelry, had the long dresses.
Holiness church. Yeah.
Yes, holiness. So you couldn't do anything. And so she took me to church probably maybe from the age of 5 to 7. And my dad, from what he says now, he says, I told her she could give all the money away that she wanted to give to the church. I was okay with that, but you can't take my TV. Because she wanted to, she was like, nope,
So-
we can't have a TV.
But your mother was prostituting herself
Yes.
at the same time, or was this just kind of a back and forth?
Yes. Okay. So my mom was a prostitute for 2 years.
Okay.
And it was between, she was about 19 years old when she started prostituting, and so about 21 when she ended.
Okay.
And then her and my dad met, and then that's when they got married.
Okay.
So she's wanting away from that life, but she's wanting to be like the best Christian she could possibly be.
Got it.
And so she's all in, and I can remember going to that church and getting baptized in that church and everything. What happened to make her leave that church, I'm not clear about, because I was 7, but I know it was a few years before she divorced that we stopped going to that church.
Gotcha.
And then when I was in the children's home, they would take every single Sunday, they would take us to a different church. So one Sunday would be Catholic church, a different church all the time. And so I was used to going to churches, but just really staying,
Right.
like it's not for me.
Right.
But when I went to White's and they actually showed me the love of God, and they really wanted to find out about me personally, I'd never had that. And that's what really touched me. And White's, before I got out, they actually said, Jodie, we want you to stay in church, so we're going to take you to Muncie, and we're going to introduce you to a church there. That way you can still go.
Okay.
I was so hyped up and ready for that. I was so excited. They take me to this beautiful church, and I walk into the youth center. Not one of those youth talked to me. When the youth pastor stood up and introduced me, they all were just put off. And I was thinking because here I tried to dress up, I'm going to this church and I want to make good friends. Not one of them talked to me. And I left there that day crushed, going, I'm not ever coming back here.
Wow. Okay. So a bad experience, you went back to what you knew, which was the drugs. Yeah.
Yes. And I can tell you, walking into that church that morning, I was ready to meet new friends. I wanted that so badly. But whatever, they could see that I wasn't from, that I was, I don't know what they could see, but they didn't want anything to do with me. It was just the craziest thing. Right. So within a few days of me going back home, I'm doing the exact same thing over and over.
Yeah.
So
that leads to the FBI coming in, raiding you guys, taking your daughter. And when you guys bailed out, because that was a turning point. I mean, something had to change on the inside to where you guys really decided we've had enough of this life. And so when that gentleman with the broken down truck walks in the gas station where you just were quitting your job, talk us, because I know that was the big turning point, and we're running a little out of time. So
Okay.
hit that real quick because that's a meaningful thing, and you actually still know the driver of that truck today.
That's right. That's right. His wife and I are best friends
Hmm.
after 30 some years. So here he is. And by the way, when Billy and I would get high, and I can remember going to bed and we would talk about going back to church one day. This is when we're selling drugs.
Hmm.
And we would talk, okay, but the magical number on that was 50. When we turn 50, we're going to go to church and we're going to get right with God. So it was always in our heart, my heart and his, to get right with God and to serve God. And so here, Jeff comes in, says, my car's doing fine. He hires Billy on the spot. And then he says, it's almost Easter time. He says, are you going to a church on Easter? And I'm like, no. And he invites us, and I'm so excited. And Billy's like, oh, great. Now church is involved. But he said, can me and my wife come to your house tonight? And here we're in Indianapolis, so we're an hour away from any of our friends. And we're like, sure. They came to our house and they ministered to us. And Jeff and Billy was in our front room. Diana and I were in my kitchen on the floor because we didn't have furniture. And she started talking to me about the second coming of Christ. And I told her, I want to rededicate right now. And she stopped right there, led me through the prayer. And so we started going to their church, little bitty church right down the street from our house. And I got baptized the night before we were to go on trial.
Wow.
And a few days after we were in trial, we were found guilty. Those Jeff and Diana and his mom and dad came to visit. His mom and dad came to visit me every single week for 2 years that I was locked up in prison.
Wow.
Amazing. And I'm telling you, they have been rock solid to us ever since that day in that gas station.
What did God do? What did God do in your life while you were in prison?
Okay, so the very first year, I had a time limit on God. So the very first year that I was in prison, I was going to church. I was in anything that they were doing with church, I was there and involved. After I was in prison for a year, I was like, okay, I should be out by now. I should be taking care of my daughter. And so I wouldn't say completely. Sometimes I would go, sometimes I wouldn't, but I was just backing away from God. But here, Billy, the whole 2 years, was writing me on a daily basis, encouraging me, all that. So he stayed in the Word of God as I was departing, as I was backing away, going, oh, well, maybe he isn't real, because he wants me to be with my daughter, but maybe he's not real. And so I went through a huge questioning.
Sure.
Sure. And then thank God we were released together 2 years later, and have been serving God ever since.
How'd you get your daughter back? Because that doesn't just automatically happen when you pop out of prison. They don't hand you, your wallet and your shoes and your daughter.
Yes. So as soon as we got out of prison, Billy contacted our lawyer, had his mom, because our daughter, this is really important, our daughter, Mindy, his mom actually took care of for 2 years. I was locked up with many women that had no idea where their children were. And I was so thankful to at least know that my child was safe and being loved. And so as soon as we got out, Billy got a hold of our lawyer, got paperwork done, had his mom sign the papers, and it went through the court system, and it was approved without us even being there, because sometimes you actually have to go through the whole court system over again. By the grace of God, it was stamped, approved, and we had Mindy back in our custody within 2 months. That's a miracle.
There's all sorts of miracles going on here, and the biggest one is what happened in you and Billy. I mean, something actually had to happen. So, why do you think you never ever went back to the drugs, the crime, slipping away from God again. What made it stick this time?
Well, I tell you, Billy, having so much word in him, within a few days, and I tell you in the book, within a few days, we had went to go see my mom. Well, all throughout my life, when any of us would go to jail or prison or children's home, anytime we were sent away somewhere, we would always have a welcome back party, and there would always be drugs at the welcome back party.
Oh,
so we went to go see my mom 2 days after we had gotten out of prison. They were having a welcome back party, and had Billy not been there, I would not have been strong not to take the drugs. But I was in line. Billy comes up, taps me on the shoulder, takes me in the kitchen and said, "Do you really want to do this? After all we've been through, we've been in prison for 2 years. We lost our daughter for 2 years. Do you really want to do this?" And then it shook some sense into me, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And so had he not been there, I would have went right back into it. It sounds crazy, but this is what people are going through all the time. And I can tell you, I was done when I was 16 years old. If I would have had the choice, like I said, going to that church in Muncie, had they taken me in their arms and said, "Come on," I was ready.
Yeah.
I would have not went back to drugs. I would have gotten new friends, but they closed the door on me. And I was just so ready not to be in that life. I didn't want it. I didn't want that.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to what God has designed, which is a need for community, the need for each other, to hold each other accountable, to encourage each other through the times of doubt and things like that. And then to obviously, not do what unfortunately happened to you in that youth group, but as a church to welcome people in who are not part of our group, so that they can be restored, so that they need not be, further broken, but can be put back together. Now, all this is way in the past, and obviously, anybody that's seen Billy, heard him sing, that's not they don't see the guy that you've described through a lot of this. They see the after, and with you right now. I mean, this is a testimony to what God can do. What do you say to those who are broken in some capacity, and just wondering if they can ever be put right again?
Yes. Well, what I say, and I recommend this, is find a good church. Find a good church. If a loving church that you have friends at. If you're going to a church and you're staying off to yourself, or you're reaching out and they're not reaching back, find a church that reaches out.
There's one out there. Yeah.
Yes. And that one church is not good for everyone. So find that one church to where you're reaching out, but they're reaching back, and get in the Word. I tell you, my time alone with God on a daily basis is huge. If I don't have it, it's not a good day for me. That one-on-one fellowship with God alone, and He's waiting for you. He's waiting for you to open up the book and spend some time with Him. And I know that, everything can get in the way if you let it. But cut out a time, even if it's 10 minutes. Start off with 10 minutes and then grow. But even if it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes alone with Him, and you need that. Yes. But it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. God has already seen it. He will forgive you. You just go to Him and ask, repent, and then move in the right direction with Him.
And you say that God is waiting, and that's true. James says, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." So there is that. But at the same time, I think maybe you can look back on even the worst parts of your life and see maybe God pursuing you. Do you have any sense of that?
Well, I tell you, Billy and I have thought this over and over. Like someone was praying for us to get through all those. We have so many times to where we could have died
Mm,
easily. We were living uh, among some pretty, doing some pretty crazy things,
yeah,
very dangerous
yeah,
things. And we're like, someone was praying for us.
yeah.
I know that.
I,
And
I
so,
I bring that up because I think if some people, when they're in the mess, they're in the brokenness. Um, the, if you really are honest, you can look back and go, okay, I think God was with me at that point, and I just want to say, yeah, He's never left you. Actually, He's with you now,
yes,
and so what you do what Jodie's talking about, which is to make that step to draw near. It's not that suddenly God appears on the scene. It's like no, you guys can actually. It's like being in the same room with somebody but never talking to them. If you'll just go over and
yes,
talk to them, well, now you can have that relationship, and that's what will start to draw you out to put things back, not make things perfect. And there's not going to be perfect people out there. Someone in chat pointed out there's not. You're not going to be perfect. Life's not going to be perfect. You're still going to have problems, but even through the difficulty, you'll find that there's something there that it's what you're lacking right now if you're in that mess.
yes.
So I appreciate Jody, both you and Billy, the encouragement you give, the way you share your story. How's your daughter today?
Okay, Mindy has three beautiful sons. She's a medical assistant. She worked in a cancer facility,
Mhm.
and she's doing very well. And I'm so thankful to God because I did not want my children to experience what I
Yeah.
experienced. It was very important to me and to Billy to be parents that were there for our children. And I can say we were there for our children.
Yeah.
And that I so wish that I had that. But now that I know that my children have that, my grandchildren have that, our whole life was changed by a man stepping out in a gas station, giving Billy a job, getting that hook in his mouth,
Right.
and then saying, come to church.
Yeah.
Because for that first 3 or 4 times we went to church, Billy would lean over and say, we are not coming back. And I'm like, okay. But then we'd go back.
Yeah, 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 and,
So,
that's the hope I want to give to you, because when you're in prison and your daughter's been taken away, you probably don't think someday she'll work in the medical community and I'll have grandchildren and life will be good. You can't see that when you're in the middle of that and when you're in prison. But I'm telling you, there's a way out, and God makes the way. So Jody, I love your story. Love you and Billy. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for sharing.
thank you. And we love and appreciate you as well.
Appreciate all you guys out there. Check out the website, jodyballenger.com. Did I put? Yeah, I put that in the chat. And the book looks like that guy right there. Beautifully Unbroken. What a beautiful story. And I'm telling you, God can do it in your life. So you may know somebody that you want them to hear this. So hit share. If you haven't liked or followed Life Today Live, do that now and come back. We've got more great interviews for you all week, all next week. So come back. We'll see you again next time.
In spite of our rebellion, in spite of our sins, in spite of our failures, God says, I love you. I love you.